Hello, this is Tony Rasmussen, and for many of you probably wondering, how was my weekend? I really don't want to talk about it. For many of you who live in Posen, you know that this weekend was the Potato Festival. And did it suck? Because in my eyes, it kind of sucked. Lots of things happened, lots of things didn't happen. Let's just get this started with. Okay, so the festival this year sucked. End of story. Here are a few of the reasons why. 1. There was no bump and run. So that basically meant there was nothing for most people to do on Sunday afternoon. There was a kielbasa eating contest, but millions of people showed up to that, but lots of people showed up. Guy won by eating 4 hot dogs. Who knew? The carnival this year really sucked. I mean, wow, did it suck. There was no tilt-a-whirl, no gravitron, no Ferris wheel, no roller coasters, nothing. Just nothing. And finally, the flea market sucked. There was nothing good at the flea market. I bought literally nothing. Like, the only thing I bought were 3 tapes. 3 tapes. That was it. How? How could a flea market suck? The vendor I often go to pick up, like, used games and crap like that didn't have shit this year. He didn't have any DS games. The Wii games he had sucked. There were no PS2 games or PS1 games. There was no GameCube games. Wow, it just sucked. There was probably one thing there that I saw that I was almost interested in buying, but I didn't buy. And that was a copy of South Park Season 4. And the only reason I didn't buy it is because it looked shitty. Yeah, the case was in really shitty condition. So I just said forget it. With all that said, though, there is one thing that I was glad. I got to try something new this year, and it's amazing, and I'm not going to get into it yet, but I will get into it soon. Just, wow, this festival was horrible. Now, I guess I heard the reason is because of a few lawsuits. There's a few court cases going on about all this, mainly with the bump and run. The carnival thing, maybe just some cutbacks that had to be used so they could pay off for the court cases and for the lawyers. Hopefully it gets all settled out by next year. If it doesn't, I'm going to leave that entire weekend because I don't want to be involved in that anymore. It was just horrible. There was nothing to do. Nothing. I think I walked through the vendors in those 3 days like 7 or 8 times. Even the garage sales, which usually, yeah, there's like 6 or 7 garage sales. I went to almost every garage sale with the exception of like 1. Because it was 5 miles out and I didn't want to go 5 miles out to go to a garage sale. They were all just dull. Really dull. There was nothing there. Well, correction. There was one garage sale I wanted to go to. One garage sale. And they were selling a DS there. A used DS. That meant I could have replaced this. They sold it before I could actually go there and buy it. I knew the family, too, that was having that garage sale. Was I pissed? Fuck yeah, I was pissed. I'm still pissed. I mean, I was waiting for that. I bought Pokemon over the summer and I haven't played it yet. So with all that said, yeah, it was just bad. I got like no positive thing to think about it. Other than that, I got introduced to something new. I've been enjoying drinking for like the last 3 days. There's been nothing else. Just, wow. There was nothing. It completely sucked. Hopefully it all gets figured out next year. Hopefully they can find something better. Just, wow. This is Tony signing out. I've got to like rethink everything that I've ever known about this town. Wow. Hello, this is Tony Rasmussen, and do you guys remember what I mentioned in the festival video that I got introduced to a new drink over the weekend? Well, here's that drink, Surge. And for anyone out there who doesn't know what this is, I'll give a little bit of a brief backstory. In the 1990s, energy drinks weren't exactly popular yet, but Coke decided to make their own energy drink, and thus made Surge. Surge was popular for about 2 to 3 years, and then eventually got discontinued in the late 90s, was pulled off the shelves, and we haven't heard from it since then. Until now, when it was reported that Coke would actually bring back Surge for a revamp. And here it is. So, I'm going to taste it, and I'm going to tell you how it tastes. Here we go. Ah, it smells good. It tastes like Mountain Dew. It clearly tastes like Mountain Dew. It is Coke's answer to Mountain Dew. But what's interesting is that it contains more caffeine, according to the label. Yes. This is considerably an early type of energy drink, and it's fucking good. Something to wake you up in the morning. That's excellent. So, yep. Got introduced to Surge over the weekend. Enjoy it. I've drinking so far 4 cans in 3 days.
Yep.
Noah's here too, I guess I gotta mention that now. You might as well come in, Noah. Oh, now he doesn't want to come in. He's shy. So, with that said, I, Tony, and
Noah,
wish you a far farewell and tell you to pick up Surge. It is really freaking good. Take care. Hey guys, it's Tony, and welcome to Back to the Future Week. This week we're going to be celebrating Back to the Future's 30th anniversary, as well as realizing that tomorrow we'll actually be living in the future. With that said, we got to start all the way back in the beginning with Back to the Future 1. To get a little bit of the background, the origin of Back to the Future actually started with Bob Gale, as he visited his parents back in Missouri in 1979. While stumbling around in their basement, he came across his father's high school yearbook. Curiously thinking about it, he wondered if he would have been friends with his own father. With this idea in mind, he went back to Hollywood to pitch the idea to his friend Robert Zemeckis. Zemeckis actually agreed with the idea, and they decided to turn it into a time travel movie. The first draft of Back to the Future was written in 1980. From 1981 to 1984, the movie was pitched around to various studios. The reason the movie never got picked up between that period was actually because of 2 reasons. 1. Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale's horrible film career at that point. Yeah, in case anyone didn't realize this, Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale, while they wrote good movies, they weren't successes at the box office. I Wanna Hold Your Hand, Used Cars in 1941 were all failures. So the assurance that any studio would have wanted to pick this film up, especially at that point in their careers, that would have been a risky gamble. Reason number 2, Fast Times at Ridgemont High came out in 1982 and was a huge success. Along with that came films like Porky's and Bachelor Party from 20th Century Fox. These films were huge successes, so everyone wanted to try to get into the sexy teen romps. Back to the Future wasn't exactly that. In fact, there was one studio at that period that was kind of interested in the film, but didn't exactly pick it up. What studio was that? That was Disney. Disney said no because they were really weirded out by Marty and Lorraine's relationship.
when Marty goes back to 1955. Other than that, how the film actually got made was a pretty interesting story. Because Zemeckis and Gale weren't able to get the movie produced between that period of 81 to 84, Zemeckis ended up taking a job from his friend Michael Douglas to direct the film Romancing the Stone. Romancing the Stone became a huge success. Universal noticed and approved Gale and Zemeckis' pet project to get produced. Back to the Future started production in 1984, with the intention of the film being released for the summer of 1985. There were a few problems, however. One of the problems was they were having a hard time trying to find a main actor. And this kind of happened because Michael J. Fox, at the time, who they wanted from the beginning, was busy working on Family Ties. In fact, it's actually kind of a surprise of how they got him in the first place. Because they couldn't get Michael J. Fox in the first place, they ended up having to choose between C. Thomas Howell and Eric Stoltz in 1984. Universal wanted Eric Stoltz, so Eric Stoltz got chosen. They filmed 1 month of footage with Eric Stoltz, and then they realized he wasn't as funny as they wanted him to be. And so they canned him, and they got Michael J. Fox. Michael J. Fox ended up sleeping about 2 to 3 hours a day, because he would spend days working on Family Ties and nights on Back to the Future. With that said, other problems that kind of came up around this point was there were a few script changes from the studio, like changing what was supposed to be a chimpanzee to a dog, changing Lorraine's name, which was supposed to be Meg, to Lorraine, and one the writers realized was going to be a big problem. The time machine was originally supposed to be a fridge. They decided to turn that into a car. That was a good move on them. One change, however, didn't happen. The head of Universal was Sid Sheinberg, and Sid Sheinberg had the suggestion of changing the title of the film from Back to the Future to Spaceman from Pluto. Executive producer Steven Spielberg, and yes, I mean E.T. and Jaws Steven Spielberg, ended up writing a memo back to Sid Sheinberg saying, "Haha, good joke." Obviously, the crew wasn't going to take that seriously, and Back to the Future stuck. One more change that happened that actually got approved, Doc was originally supposed to be Professor Brown. To the plot of the movie. It's 1985, and cool hip teen Michael J. Fox, I mean Marty McFly, whoops, can't be living a much better perfect life. He's got a girlfriend, a promising future with a band, but is lacking in one problem. His family is really dysfunctional. He's got an alcoholic mother and a wimpy father. His siblings could care none the less. So one morning, Marty gets a call from Doc Brown, telling him to meet him at the Twin Pines Mall the next morning. Marty goes there and discovers that Doc had invented a time machine. And after Doc gets shot down by some Libyan terrorists after the first test became a success, Marty accidentally gets in the car and sends himself back to 1955. Now Marty's got to find a way to get back home before he ends up damaging his own existence, which, by the way, he's already done by accidentally causing his parents not to meet. And now Lorraine has fallen in love with him. On top of that, Marty's also got to try to defend himself from the bully Biff, played by Thomas Wilson. So, how is the movie? Well, many people say it's a classic. I agree. It's a classic. I love the film. I really do. It's one of my favorites. My favorite part of Back to the Future overall, other than the great story and the great characters, if I had to pick out one scene that I really loved in particular, it's the scene I rewind over and over again when I was a teenager enjoying this movie. That would be the skateboarding sequence. I've seen that scene over and over again. In fact, in my head, when I would sleep, I would dream of that scene over and over again because I would just want to reenact it. That scene just blew my mind. And you gotta remember, like, I barely got into skateboarding. Like, I only use skateboarding to just get from point A to point B. But just seeing that was just enough to say, wow, this could be something else. Other than that, it's a really great movie. It's a classic. Hands down, one of my favorite movies of all time. So, with that said, I will see you guys next time when we'll be talking about the sequel that many people seem to have mixed feelings about. So, see you later. Welcome back, guys. It's me, Tony, and we're back with Back to the Future Week. And guess what today is? According to Back to the Future Part 2, we are now in the future. Boy, does it blow. Let's talk about Back to the Future 2. So, Back to the Future 2, the backstory behind that was a little more interesting. Following Back to the Future 1's release, Back to the Future was a huge success at the box office. It became the top grossing film of 1985 with $285 million worldwide. So Universal obviously was going to make sequels. And they did the smart thing as opposed to many other studios where they would just make the sequels without the original creator's intent or without many of the original actors. They asked Bob Gale and Bob Zemeckis if they wanted to come back to make this. And to Universal's surprise, they said yes. But they said yes if we can only get majority of the original cast back together. And that's what they actually did. They got majority of the cast back together with the exception of one person. That being Crispin Glover, who decided not to come back because he wanted... Supposedly there are two different stories to this. Crispin's story is that, he wanted to break out into different roles and not be stuck to typecasting. Gale and Zemeckis' point of view on the whole controversy is that he wanted more money. Whose side I believe, I really don't know. They both tell very convincing arguments. I guess Glover actually had more of a shocking story behind his where they actually talked about using his old prosthetic face to put on the new actor. Eerie. So the production on Back to the Future 2 started in 1986. And Bob Gale ended up writing the sequels because Bob Zemeckis was off working on Who Framed Roger Rabbit for Disney, which didn't get released till 1988. So, while Zemeckis was working on Roger Rabbit, Gale was working on Back to the Future 2 and Back to the Future 3. Because his original plan for Back to the Future 2 was to be this 4-hour epic that was going to chronicle 2 and 3. And I kind of find that a really surprising concept. I could have seen that as just one giant sequel to a successful movie, but I guess Universal at the time realized that was going to cost a lot of money. Here's our suggestion. Either you cut down on what would have been the fourth act, or aka part 3, or split the movie into two, which is what they ended up doing, splitting the movie into two. Some other things that kind of came and went was, originally, the movie wasn't going to have Marty and Doc go back to the first film. The original idea was actually for them to go back to the 60s. But that idea didn't work out because Gale realized, well, we kind of already did that story with Back to the Future 1. Speaking of which, let's get to the plot of Back to the Future 2. Back to the Future 2 takes place where Back to the Future 1 left off. And for many of you who don't know what Back to the Future 1 ended with, Marty went back to 1985, realized that because of his influences to his father and his mother, he changed history. Biff now works for them, and George is a successful writer, and Lorraine a happy mother. And Marty got the car he wanted, and Jennifer showed up, and everything was all happy, hunky-dory, until Doc showed up at the end, telling Marty they needed to go to the future. According to Zemeckis and Gale, by the way, that was supposed to be a joke. They never intended for that to set up Back to the Future 2, because if they did, well, Jennifer wouldn't have been in the sequels. So Doc, Marty, and Jennifer end up getting into the DeLorean and get sent to 2015. When they get to 2015, Doc instantly knocks out Jennifer, so she has nothing to do with the entire mission, so she doesn't end up compromising anything. As soon as Jennifer's knocked out, Doc explains to Marty that his son, Marty Jr., is actually planning to join Biff's grandson, Griff, in committing a crime. And Doc must go back to take his son's place in order to make sure it doesn't happen, because his entire family will end up in jeopardy because of that. And when I mean by his entire family, I mean his future generations. So Marty agrees with the plan and ends up dressing up as his son, Marty McFly Jr. He goes into the Cafe 80s, ends up housing it with Biff after playing Wild Gunman, by the way, with Elijah Wood. Pretty cool. Hoverboard chase. Griff and his gang get thrown in jail. They change history. Marty decides to be a complete a-hole and ends up buying a sports almanac from 2015 so that he can go back in time and bet it on all these sporting events and make a lot of money. Doc warns him about the consequences of changing history and instantly throws out the sports almanac that Marty bought. Biff ends up getting his hands on it and finds out that Doc invented the time machine. So, while Marty and Doc go off to save Jennifer, who got apprehended by police and sent back to Marty's house, Biff steals the DeLorean and goes back in time to give himself the almanac, basically to change history. So when Marty, Doc, and Jennifer go back to 1985, they realize 1985 has changed. And with this alternate 1985, Biff has controlled power and has been married to Lorraine and is now Marty's stepdad. With all of that said, Marty and Doc do find out eventually that Biff ended up giving himself the almanac in 1955. So this means the characters have to go back to the first movie. So, after dropping Jennifer off, Doc and Marty decide to go back to 1955 and end up having to revisit all the old events that happened from the first film, along with creating some new ones. Marty tries throughout the entire film to get Biff and get back the almanac, but Biff is a hard guy to crack. Eventually Marty does get back the almanac, he eventually burns it, and they all have a big celebratory ending. That is until Doc gets struck by lightning. Doc gets struck by lightning and is sent somewhere through time. Marty has no clue where, that is until he gets a letter from a Western Union man. The letter states that Doc has been sent back to 1885 and that he's doing fine and well. Marty is reassured of this and realizes that there's only one way he can get back home, which is going back and convincing the Doc from 1955 to give him a hand in looking for a DeLorean to send him back. That's Back to the Future 2 in a nutshell. Many people have mixed feelings on this movie, and I can understand why. On one hand, it's not that bad of a sequel, but on the other hand, the plot is way too complicated, and there's just a lot going on that no one will really follow, especially if you watch the first one. I remember the first time I watched it, I was sitting there going, it kind of felt a little shorter than the first one. Like, the first one was almost 2 hours, but this one kind of felt like an hour and a half. And to be surprising, it's also 2 hours, but it just feels shorter. That's maybe because the plot moves a little more quickly in this one than it did in the first one. But that's probably just my observations. How do I feel about the movie? I have nothing against it. I actually really enjoy it. Is it up there with the first one? Not really. Not really. I mean, it has its problems, but it also has its highlights too. I love their depiction of the future, especially for how wrong it is. Seriously, folks, why do we not have flying cars or hoverboards? What the fuck? But I will give them kudos for this. They found a way to throw in some Roger Rabbit jokes. Yes, once Robert Zemeckis got back from working on Who Framed Roger Rabbit in the winter of 1988, they decided that because they were still in production of Back to the Future 2, they were going to throw in some Roger Rabbit cameos. So Roger Rabbit has a cameo in 2015, and actually the character actor who played Roger Rabbit, Charles Fleischer, has 2 cameos in the film playing a character named Terry, who I actually have to say is probably one of my favorites in this entire movie. With this said, though, do I hate it? No, I don't hate it. I don't hate this movie at all. Does everyone else hate it? Kind of. They've now seen it as just a cult classic, but it's still kind of hated. With this said, guys, join us tomorrow where we'll be discussing the end of the trilogy. With this said, guys, see you next time. Hey guys, it's Tony and welcome back to the Future Week. Now we get to the final part of the trilogy, Back to the Future Part 3. Back to the Future Part 3 started production immediately after Back to the Future Part 2. In fact, at one point, the productions were actually being done simultaneously, with Back to the Future 2 doing its final sound mixing in the summer of 1989, while Back to the Future 3 was being filmed. This actually kind of caused a little bit of a strain on Back to the Future 2 because Zemeckis wasn't there to keep his full attention on it. So that's why they tried their hardest to make Back to the Future 3 a more satisfying sequel than Back to the Future 2, as they found out it wasn't doing so well. Anyway, they decided to do something interesting for Back to the Future 3. As the first two movies kind of focused on Marty and his family problems, they decided this time they were going to focus on Doc. And with that said, it's kind of an interesting idea, but I guess we'll have to see what the plot has to say about it. Back to the Future 3 takes place immediately after Back to the Future 2, after where it left off. Marty runs back to find Doc, 1955 Doc to be precise, after he had sent Marty from the first movie back to 1985. Marty shows up again, this time to tell Doc that he came back from the future and needs Doc's help to get himself back home. Doc goes into a shock and knocks himself out. He then wakes up later in the evening and thought at first it was all a dream until Marty actually shows up and ends up telling Doc everything that had happened, that he had got struck by lightning and got sent back to the Old West. So Doc ends up agreeing to help Marty get himself back to 1985. They find the DeLorean, which Doc had hidden in a cave, but Marty soon discovers that Doc will actually get shot in 1885. By who? Biff's great-great ancestor. Who knew? Buford Tannen. So Marty decides instead of going back to 1985, he decides he's going to go back to the Old West to save Doc. And with that said, Marty goes back to 1885, finds Doc after he almost got hanged, and ends up changing history for what presumably is supposed to be the best, but ends up being the worst, as he ends up becoming the one who has to fight off Buford Tannen instead of Doc. And Doc ends up, as we find out, having his own problems as he ends up falling in love with a school teacher named Clara, played by Mary Steenburgen. With all that said, this is where the plot gets kind of interesting. And when I mean kind of interesting, I mean they're trying to find a way to stretch it, in which the easy answer would have just been, hey, they could have just gotten a DeLorean, got on a train, and left. Actually, that's a plot itself, is how they're actually going to get the DeLorean back home. As Marty finds out that the tank got ruptured, and, well, they have no way of getting home, they try various methods until they decide that, well, a train is fast enough, if you give it the right power, that they could send themselves back to 1985. Well, with that idea in mind, there are now two problems. Marty's got to solve the problem with Buford, and Doc's got to solve the problem with Clara. Doc decides to talk to Clara and tell her the truth that he's from the future, but Clara doesn't take this so well. And she ends up breaking Doc's heart. Doc, depressed by this, finally decides that he must go home now. And this is right after he gets drunk, by the way. Marty, on the other hand, ends up finally having to face off Buford, as Buford tries to shoot him. Marty's secret weapon? Bulletproof vest. Yep, he uses an actual lid to a metal stove and bulletproof vest. He ends up knocking Biff out, finally getting his revenge, and the two decide to head off to the train, heading home. Well, you think the movie would kind of end with them going home. But Clara ends up finding out that Doc was telling the truth, and goes after him. So Doc at one point has to decide whether or not he wants to actually go home, and by the way, this is during the climax, or whether or not he wants to save Clara. What does he end up doing? He saves Clara and ends up staying in the Old West. It's not a bad idea, but, you know, who am I to judge? Marty goes back home, ends up waking up Jennifer, decides not to do the event which was foretold in Back to the Future 2, causes Marty to become a loser in the future, and everything is all hunky-dory. The DeLorean gets destroyed. What a shitload of crap. This is something they would fix up in Back to the Future, the animated series, where they would kind of reveal that the DeLorean got fixed, or Doc built a new one, but in the game they revealed that At one point during their adventures, the DeLorean got duplicated. There are so many ways the DeLorean just came about again. Who knew? With all that in mind, Doc shows back up with the time train and explains to Marty that, well, he and Claire are planning to probably live back in Hill Valley, but they are not sure whether or not to stay in the present or in the Old West. But he does give Marty a present, and the movie ends off with the train showing up and disappearing into time and space, thus ending the entire trilogy. Lovely. So, what do I have to think about this? Many people don't like this one. They say it's the black sheep of the trilogy, just like part 2. Sometimes, I'm going to kind of agree. I don't necessarily hate it. It just was a little too slow. And I can understand. I mean, the idea of doing a Western for your third movie is kind of a little risky, but it was a kind of a good payoff in the same sense. And plus, it was at a time when there weren't that many Westerns out in cinema. Something about it just didn't kind of click with me. Like, I remember first watching it and actually keeping my eye on, like, my phone or on my watch and just thinking to myself, my God, this thing's still going? Maybe it's just me, maybe it's my impatience-ness, but I don't find the movie that bad. It's just, it was way too long. And I feel that there could have been some story ideas that could have been kind of ironed out a little more. And I'm not going to judge Gale and Zemeckis on this one, because I can understand, well, Gale wrote majority of all this out, that they were just trying to, find a way to wrap up the entire series. This was the best they had. And actually, the idea of going to the Old West was actually Michael J. Fox's. So, I guess kudos to him. So with that said, it's an okay sequel. I don't necessarily enjoy it, but I do appreciate that it was trying to just end off on a high note, and it did. So with that said, my favorite scene is actually the final encounter with Buford and just Marty finally getting to knock the crap out of him. Other than that, it's kind of a nice way to wrap up the trilogy, but this is also a nice way that we get to wrap up the trilogy of films reviewed. So with that said, we'll see you next time. We'll be talking about Back to the Future in the home consoles and on television. See you next time. Hey guys, it's Tony, and welcome back to the Future Week. Today, we're going to discuss Back to the Future in other mediums. Not only the film series, we're now just going to discuss the animated series and the games. We'll start off with the games. The first Back to the Future game came out in 1985 for the Commodore, the Amiga, and a few other computers, probably the Apple II if I'm recollecting correctly. It wasn't that great, but it wasn't that bad either. The first official console Back to the Future wouldn't come out till 1989. And it came out for the NES. It's irritating and many people hate it. Me? Meh. After that, they would make Back to the Future 2 and 3 for the NES, Back to the Future 3 for the Genesis, Super Back to the Future 2 for the SNES, and the most recent incarnation today, Back to the Future the game, which in some ways many fans are declaring Back to the Future 4. What do I feel about those games? Well, 2 and 3 piss me off, 3 pisses me off, Super Back to the Future 2 is actually really good, by the way. And Back to the Future the game? It's not bad. I enjoy it. I enjoy it. I just think episodes 3 and 4 are really freaking boring and were unnecessary. But I still enjoyed it. With that said, there has been no talks of another Back to the Future game recently. Telltale hasn't said anything about a possible Back to the Future game 2. So there will probably be no continuing storyline for the Back to the Future game that recently came out. But now we have to look at the television side, as we have to look at Back to the Future the animated series. Back to the Future the animated series debuted on CBS in 1991. a year following Back to the Future 3. It was created by both CBS and Universal Animation Studios and Amblin Television. It kind of continues from where Back to the Future 3 left off, but I feel Back to the Future the game covered that a little better. This show is centered around Doc and Clara and their boys, Jules and Vern, who we did see at the end of Part 3. Marty is barely in the show, maybe for probably 3 or 4... Okay, he's in the show, but he's barely in the show. Like, he's not the main character. He's not having an adventure with Doc. To summarize the show, there's a live-action segment with Christopher Lloyd in the beginning and at the ending of the episode. And in the middle, when they do the animated series, Doc is actually voiced by the voice of Homer Simpson, Dan Castellaneta. That is awesome. And as you probably don't realize by now, I'm a big Simpsons fan. So, with that said, everyone else, though, from the film came back to do their voices, with the exception of Michael J. Fox, who is off having a kind of successful film career still. He kind of didn't get out of the film business until 2010, 2011. Other than that, the show many fans criticized for being a little too ridiculous and many people saying, oh, it had a lot of inconsistencies. My feelings on the show are kind of meh. To be honest, the show's not that bad because there are a few gems in the series. There's actually 2 episodes I love. My Pop the Alien and Marty McFly PFC. Both of these because they actually take place in the kind of current past. Yeah, Marty McFly PFC takes place during World War II, and My Pop the Alien takes place in 1967. Those are 2 great examples of great episodes. And again, about the continuity of the show versus the movies, yeah, they kind of sucked at that. Tom Wilson as Biff, though, wasn't that bad in the show. So, yeah, if anyone wants to know, for games, actually pick up Back to the Future the game. Not this one, the newer one. And for the animated series, I would actually recommend watching the 2 episodes I just named, because those are at least the 2 closest episodes to feeling like Back to the Future. With that said, guys, thanks for watching Back to the Future Week. I will see you for the last review tomorrow. Hey guys, this is Tony, and welcome back to the Future Week. This is a bonus video for everyone, to end out the week. As many people may know, following the end of the Back to the Future trilogy, there were a lot of time travel movies that kind of came and went. There were movies like The Butterfly Effect, Clock Stoppers. There was a remake of the original 1960 Time Machine, which, by the way, really freaking sucked. But there's one movie that I really wanted to point out for this review. And it's not exactly a time travel movie, though. That's the interesting thing about it. It's not a time travel movie, but it feels like one. And that would be the 1998 film, Pleasantville. So, you're probably asking yourselves, well, if it's not a time travel movie, why are you covering it? Why aren't you covering something like The Butterfly Effect or Clock Stoppers, which are in some ways some superior follow-ups to the original Back to the Future? Well, I enjoy those movies, first off, and I do think they are good successors. What I think differs Pleasantville from something like The Butterfly Effect is, while it's not a time travel story, it feels like one. It kind of has that Back to the Future vibe in it. But I don't want to waste any of your time going over my opinions just yet. Let's get over a little bit of the plot. The movie centers around a pair of twins from the 1990s named David and Jennifer, played by Tobey Maguire and Reese Witherspoon. The twins have 2 completely different personalities, just to let you know. David's mind is more introverted, and he enjoys watching television a hell of a lot. while Jennifer's mind is really extroverted and she just has a rebellic nature. One night their mother is going away for a weekend vacation, and the two are left home alone. David's excited because he wants to use the TV that night because there's going to be a marathon of his favorite TV show. Guess what it is? Pleasantville. But Jennifer wants to use it so that she can have her date over and they can watch MTV. The two end up bickering and eventually break the TV remote. Just then, a mysterious repairman, played by Don Knotts, shows up and eventually quizzes David on the show. David gets all the answers correct, and Don Knotts hands him a special remote. The two eventually start fighting over it again after Don Knotts leaves, and end up getting sucked into the world of Pleasantville. Now it's the 90s culture bashing with the 50s ideals. And what's going on? Well, because of Jennifer's influence, along with David's influence into the town, the show's starting to change. And it's not only changing in its tone, but in its color, as color is starting to be revealed in the show, which is mainly black and white. So that right there is the main plot, and I have to say, when I first saw this, I was kind of moved by it, and not moved in like emotionally, I just moved by it by creativeness. This is actually a really creative idea for a film. An idea of two kids kind of getting sucked into this TV show and kind of changing the rules. What I do really enjoy about this show, I mean this movie, see, now you got me confused. It's just the fact that it is this weird, really weird, like Back to the Future like vibe of introverting things. It's, you know, that idea like with Back to the Future, you know, Marty, he had to kind of go along with it, but at the same time he kind of keyed in on certain things where he would be like, oh, you know, in the future, you know, this could kind of exist and this, could exist. In this movie, they kind of point out, like, you know, why is this like this when this, in reality, is really this? And I think the best thing about this movie is, you know, it is, the two main characters are trying to keep to their ideals, with David actually trying to, you know, keep the show intact, trying to keep everything in the show moving the way the show is supposed to, while Jennifer, on the other hand, is really just deciding to screw around with the show, much to David's dismay. What really kind of stands out, though, is the idea of just the entire movie, from like a certain point onward, is in black and white. And it is completely in black and white until about halfway through, when things start slowly turning to color. And it is really interesting as an idea. For anyone who's a big Fast and Furious fan and who wants to see this movie, by the way, Paul Walker's in it. Yeah, he's in the movie. I didn't realize this until like a second or third viewing. He's in the damn movie. Paul Walker's in Pleasantville. It is just weird when I found out it was him. He plays a character named Skip from the TV show who ends up dating Jennifer. It is just the weirdest thing. I think the casting was really good. And the story is just really creative. It's really creative. And I know you could say, well, it seems kind of generic when you explain it to me, but if you watch it and, you know, kind of understand what actions they do to change the history of the show or to just change the context, it is really great. The parent characters in that movie are really great. William H. Macy and Joan Allen. They just really sell it as 50s parents. And Jeff Daniels, who plays the restaurant owner in the soda shop, he's really good. When I heard Daniels was in this, when I first watched it, I was just like, oh, you know, I've only seen him in Dumb and Dumber and Escanaba in the Moonlight, but like he really has some serious chops, and you know, and I've seen that now again and again with all of his other movies. But if there is one thing that I'm kind of miffed about with this movie, it's sadly enough the ending. Yeah, I really didn't like the ending of this movie, and I didn't like it to a point where I'm like, oh, I'm never going to watch it again. No, I just don't like it in the choice that the way they kind of presented the ending and the way they were kind of, you know, summarizing everything up, I was just like, something here just ain't right and it doesn't make sense. So, if you haven't seen the movie, you know, you can end the review right here. It's a good movie. The ending's a little iffy for me. It's iffy for anyone else. But for anyone who has seen the movie and wants to have me discuss the ending, I'm going into it right now. So spoilers. In the ending of the movie, David and Jennifer's actions within the entire realm of the show turns everything into complete color. And I actually thought in my head while watching this a second and third time, I thought, oh man, that's like a really good allegory for television shows. Like, especially shows during like the 50s and 60s. Where the shows, started out in black and white and were really innocent. And as the episodes went on, it kind of got a little darker, but got a lot more, colorful, so to say, with the picture quality and stuff. Where, the show started being presented in color, but they started doing a little more either ridiculous plots or darker plots. Anyway, so the town is finally fully in color. They've gotten, rid of the bad guy, who was played by the late, great J.T. Walsh. And everyone just kind of walks out, and they're just like, well, I guess this is the world we live in now, and it's never going to change. So, I'm trying to explain this without pissing myself off. So, the choice in the movie, the way they end it is, Jennifer ends up staying in the show. Yes, that's literally how they end it. Jennifer decides she's going to stay in the show and go to college. And, meanwhile, David decides that he's going to leave the show and go back to the real world. And by this point, most of the characters know that, these people were from the outside world and that they came in. Because, that was kind of the only explanation for why the entire realm of the show was changing. So David decides to leave, and he leaves. And he's there, he comes back to the real world, he shuts off the marathon because it's over, and his mother, played by Jane Kasmerick, by the way, from Malcolm in the Middle, is there, and she's kind of crying, and David goes over and kind of comforts her, and at first I thought that was just really weird. Like, I know, like, it's supposed to mirror, like, what happened, earlier in the film when he's doing the same thing to Joan Allen's character, but I was just like, that's just really odd that they would do that. But that's not the horrible part. The horrible part was the idea that, that Jennifer would stay in the show and that David would leave. I was like, well, gee, you just blew, like, what could have been just an easily understood ending. With just, David kind of realizing, well, he could kind of fit into this world, and, he could have stayed in the show. Like, that was the way I was thinking, like, oh, I can understand how the ending's going to be. Like, they're going to leave and they're going to have a newfound appreciation. No, they're deciding at one point whether or not to stay within the realms of the show. I was just like, well, they decided to do that. Dave's got to stay in the show, and Jennifer's got to leave, understanding why David was the way he was. Instead, they have Jennifer understand the way, the reason David was the way he was, but she ends up staying in the show, and I was just like, why would you do that? I was like, that just makes no sense. It kind of, I can understand in certain contexts, but in, like, the whole realm of the entire movie, I was like, you think that would just be, like, the easy answer of having David stay in the show and Jennifer leave, but they decided to, like, completely flip that, and I'm not saying it's a bad ending, I'm just saying it was kind of an interesting change that I really didn't appreciate. So yeah, so that's the ending, and, David goes back to the real world, Jennifer stays in the show, and the director actually, during the commentary, stated that was one of the questions they had while they were writing the movie, was like, if Jennifer's in the show, wouldn't the mother eventually notice that Jennifer's not around in the real world? And I guess his logic was that, each day in the show is a half hour in the real world. So she could be gone literally for 2 years, and I guess in the realm of reality, she'd be gone for like a week, 2 weeks. I was just like, okay, so that's your excuse to get out of that loophole. But yeah, this isn't a bad movie. I really don't hate this film. I love this film, actually. I think it's up there with Back to the Future. It's a good film. It's just the ending kind of miffed me a little bit. But with that said, thank you guys for watching Back to the Future Week. We'll have a new episode of mini reviews starting next week. Yeah, thank you guys for watching Back to the Future Week. We got another theme month coming in November. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. See you next time.
Hey guys, this is Tony. Happy Halloween, everyone. Today we are going to be talking about a little bit of a subject that's kind of iffy for some. Let me start off by asking you, what do you do for Halloween? What kind of tradition do you do? It could be going out trick-or-treating or going out to a party in costume, for some. For others, it could be sitting at home watching some scary movies, or sitting at home and watching some Halloween specials, or in my case, I watch Treehouse of Horror every year. It could be about anything. For some, though, it could be just reading a book. Yeah, some people just like reading. That's nothing wrong with that. But what kind of books do they read? Well, they'll read something from Stephen King, one of the greats, Edgar Allan Poe, author of one of my favorite short stories, The Raven. Or they'll read something from, anywhere else. Often or not, though, there are some times where I've heard that people have read creepypastas for Halloween. Now, this gets me asking the question, should creepypastas technically count as the next form of Halloween stories? Well, yes and no. Well, let's get down to the bare basics, actually, because I'm really not sure. Creepypastas have technically been around for about 10 years now, and they're often gory, kind of scary, more or less disturbing stories about some of our favorite things, whether it be a TV show, a movie, or a game. And it's often, the people that kind of, involve themselves with it, or people who end up coming across it. That's what a creepypasta technically is any of those types of stories. Some of the best ones that, everyone has said, oh, these are the best, or the best ones ever told, would be Dead Bart, Squidward Suicide, and the one that's one of my personal favorites is the Mother Metroid one, which is kind of my personal favorite because I thought it was the darkest, and it was kind of very eerie, even looking at the photos. So, again, back to the question. Should it technically count as the next form of Halloween stories, or in some ways, are they the next form of Halloween stories? Like I said, yes and no. Yes, they could be. I mean, they are creepy, they are disturbing, and they are gory. Kind of like many of the stories Stephen King and Edgar Allan Poe write. But because it kind of relies on, the pop culture icons of kind of that period, where you gotta use SpongeBob or Simpsons or, any game that you've known out there, it's gonna kind of take a while for people to kind of really grasp that. And I don't want to be mean about it and say, well, obviously, no, it's not going to happen, but I don't know, in some ways, it could happen. I could see something like Squidward Suicide as a great Halloween tale to tell, especially a tale that's dark as that. I mean, whew, yeah, I could see that definitely being told. So, I guess to really answer the question, they can be. It's just going to take a little longer for them to fully get into kind of being a Halloween mainstay. I mean, there are some people that read them, and for the people that do, hey, that's great. And I technically do sometimes. I'll read one or two, but yeah, it's gonna take a while to get there. So yeah, that's what I thought I would cover today for Halloween. Instead of doing a Halloween special, I thought I'd cover that subject. And in hindsight, yeah, Mother Metroid is one of my favorites to read. And yeah, to kind of wrap things up, tell me in the comments if you read creepypastas. I mean, yeah, it's disturbing, it's dark, and, it's not for everyone, but if you do, kind of let me know in the comments. If you don't, hey, that's fine. In the comments, you can just tell me what you do for Halloween. Because, I usually just watch Treehouse of Horror and start passing out candy. With all this said, guys, it's Happy Halloween here at TVC, and we will see you next time.
guys, it's Tony, and welcome to Mario Month. For the entire month, or for the span of 3 weeks, with 3 freaking episodes, I will be going over the history and my critiques of the Mario series. We're not going to be covering all of the games, we're going to be covering the main series of games, as well as a few non-essentials here and there. But with all that said, let's get into the origin of Mario. The year is 1979, and Nintendo decides to get into the home video game market, especially in America. They start out with, on the wrong foot, Radar Scope. Radar Scope, unfortunately, was a failure, and the crew realized they didn't have enough workers to make a whole new game, so they had to hire an illustrator. The illustrator's name was Shigeru Miyamoto. Miyamoto decided that, he hated tennis games, he hated shooting games, and he hated space games regardless. So he was going to make a game with a story. Yes, this became the first game with a story. That game would become Donkey Kong, and Donkey Kong would introduce us to the character we would all know and love as the pesky little plumber, Mario. Mario would eventually get his own game in 1983, where he would star alongside his brother, Luigi. And with the success of that game, Miyamoto began working on another game for their then new up-and-coming console, the Famicom, which would be over here, the Nintendo Entertainment System. Thus, that brings us to Super Mario Bros. Super Mario Bros. Is considered a classic by many, and for good reason, too. I mean, essentially, this saved the video game industry in 1985. It also saved Nintendo's butt in 1985, too, because they were losing revenue trying to advertise to the American audience. With all of that said, what are my feelings about the game? It's a good game. I really enjoy it. I love playing it. Is it one of my favorite NES games of all time? No. I'd at least put it in the top 5, but it's not really. It's a good game, regardless. It doesn't have many issues. I know where half the secrets are, thanks to many other people who play the game online. So, to kind of end off that review, yeah, it's fine. Moving onwards. With the success of Super Mario Bros. Selling 40 million cartridges worldwide, being a record for the time, Nintendo decided that they needed to capitalize quickly and make a sequel. Thus, in 1986, they began work on Super Mario Bros. 2. It was released a few months later, and to some fans out there, it was considered harder than the original. And I'm not talking about the US version yet, by the way, this is only the Japanese version. The game was so hard that by the time they sent the game over to the US, the person who was in charge of picking and choosing games, Howard Phillips, he said it was too hard and they needed a new sequel, something that was a lot more appealing for the American audience. What this resulted in was them taking a game that they had worked on in 1987, called Doki Doki Panic, which they had done for Fuji Television, as part of their Summer Dreams event, which happened all summer that year, and they conversed that into Super Mario Bros. 2 that we all know and love. Super Mario Bros. 2 has an interesting story. Mario had a dream. The dream involved him going through a dream world. The next morning he has a picnic with his friends and he discovers the dream world. Deciding that they needed help, he and his friends go through the dream door to the dream world, where they end up having to face off the evil Toad Wart. So, what do I think about Super Mario Bros. 2? If you've watched the Ransom Reviews episode of Mario Rama, then you know, wholeheartedly, this is my favorite Mario game. But, here's something you did not hear yet. Or if you did, well, I'm going to tell you again. This is my favorite game of all time. Yes. I love the designs. I love the music. I love the gameplay. I love everything about it. As for everyone else, they had mixed reception. Eventually, a couple years after the game was released, they discovered that this wasn't the real Mario 2, according to them. So, with that being discovered, they realized that, well, fuck, it wasn't going to count as a real Mario game. And it has now been almost 30 years later, and come on guys, let's get over it. It's Mario 2. Following the success of Mario 2, Nintendo immediately began working on Mario 3. And Mario 3 had a kind of interesting publicity stunt. In 1989, Universal released the movie The Wizard, starring Fred Savage. The movie was a mediocre hit, becoming a cult classic. But throughout the movie, they were talking about this video game tournament. And at the end, when they get to the video game tournament and they get to the final round, what shall be announced upon them? Super Mario Bros. 3. My feelings on Super Mario Bros. 3 are kind of mixed. I enjoy the game, but I do feel it's a little overrated. Now hear me out on this one. It's overrated because I don't think it deserved as much respect as Mario 2 did. Mario 2 was made on a very short deadline. You gotta realize that. Mario 3 began production in 1988. And it was released in 1990. So yeah, that had a 2-year span. This Mario 2 had 1 year. 1 year to get done and ready. And I guess you could say the same thing about the original Mario 2. So yeah, with the tighter schedule, yeah, they've turned out somewhat of the better product. This, it's not bad, it's not one of my favorites. I'd put it in the top 10 at least. Following the success of Mario 3, that wrapped up the original NES Mario trilogy, because the NES sadly ceased production in 1994. In 1991, though, Nintendo released the Super Nintendo, and with that came the launch game of Super Mario World. And I know what you're saying, Tony, why are you not showing me the cartridge? Well, I don't have the cartridge. I got the Virtual Console copy of it. And I'm not going to play the Virtual Console copy of it behind my back, because I don't want to get in trouble by Nintendo. So you're not going to see it. Ha. What can I say about the game, though? I enjoy it. I think it's a really good game. I think it's not one of my favorites on the SNES. It is, though, one of the best. Introduced us to Yoshi, and I know my friend Nathan would really enjoy that. It kind of revolutionized what Mario 3 had done before. New power-ups, different world maps. That's all fine and good. So let's kind of get through all that. Mario World was a success. Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island, which was kind of a prequel to the original Mario games. That was a success too. And my feelings on that game is, it's okay. It's not one of my favorites, it's just okay. Now, let's jump ahead another console generation to 1996 when Nintendo released the N64 with the launch title Super Mario 64. This game basically was my childhood. I remember playing this game all the time. I played it after school, I played it during the weekends, I played it during break. It was a fun game. Between this and Ocarina of Time, those were the two games I played a lot when I was a kid. In fact, I would say it was this game in general that got me introduced to Nintendo and got me hooked. So, what are my thoughts on it? Has it aged well? Well, kind of. To be honest, it does feel the essence of 90s video games, but then again, that was the time, and that was kind of what they only had. The style, the way I put it is, it's a time capsule of 96. Kind of how Final Fantasy VII is a time capsule of 1997, this is a time capsule of 1996. The CGI, with the character designs and stuff, it's not bad. It's actually really good. And that's kind of interesting because the N64 became like the second best-selling console that generation, beneath the PlayStation. But the goal for the N64 was to have better pixel quality and not faster speed. Well, actually, no. It was the other way around, I'm sorry. My mind's kind of warped a little there. Faster speed, but not as great pixel quality. So, some people did criticize it. Now, thus ends part 1 of Mario Month. And yes, for all the stuttering and all the mistakes I've made, I am truly sorry. You gotta remember, stress. Join us next week when we'll be talking about Mario in the 2000s and the 2010s. So basically, we're gonna be covering what was essentially the peaks and valleys of Mario. This is Tony saying, I will see you next time. Let's go. guys, this is Tony, and welcome back to Mario Month. When we last left off, Mario 64 was debuting in '96, and the N64 ended up placing in second during the generation race. As we entered the new millennium, lots of things started to happen. PlayStation released the PS2, and Microsoft introduced the Xbox. With Nintendo, however, there were a lot more complicated things going on. They were planning to release an add-on for the N64 called the Disk Drive, but unfortunately it failed. So instead, they decided to opt into their new console, which was coming out in 2001, codenamed the Dolphin, which became the Nintendo GameCube. With this said, there were speculations at the time of whether or not there was going to be a Mario 64 2. And while there was one planned for the N64 DD, it never came to fruition. And at Space World 2000, we ended up getting a demo called Mario 128. It wouldn't be until 2002 when we finally get our new Mario game, Super Mario Sunshine. In some people's opinion, this is considered the black sheep of the entire series. But in my opinion, it is, besides Wind Waker, one of my favorite GameCube games of all time. It is colorful, it is fun, it is enjoyably just watery. It just screams out beach. And with that said, the game was kind of a success, but at the same time kind of a failure. But you couldn't really blame Nintendo for that one. That's more or less the problem with the GameCube and just people questioning whether or not they wanted to buy it. We wouldn't see another new Mario game until 2006 with New Super Mario Bros. For the DS. New Super Mario Bros. Was just a retelling of the original Mario Brothers with new graphics and new power-ups. And this spawned off an entire series of games. New Super Mario Bros. 2, New Super Mario Bros. Wii, New Super Mario Bros. Wii U, New Super Mario Luigi U, New Super Luigi U, guys, you get it. In celebration of your Luigi. So we wouldn't see kind of a new innovation for a Mario game, which, again, hasn't been done since Sunshine, until 2007, when Mario Galaxy was released. And this game is my favorite game for the Wii. It is my favorite game of all time. If I had a top 3, Mario Galaxy, Twilight Princess, Punch-Out. There you go. There's my top 3. But Galaxy is just so innovative in just how they figured out the mechanics of just exploring a planet and exploring a galaxy. This game was so big that it got a sequel a year later, which some people just said was kind of an expansion pack, and I would have to agree with that, but at the same time, I do admire it for being kind of new. And when I mean kind of, I mean sort of, with new places to go to. I have that one on the Virtual Console for my Wii U, so I play it all the time. We wouldn't see another innovative Mario game until 2013, with Super Mario 3D World. Super Mario 3D World is, I'm not going to say my favorite game for the Wii U, but it is in my top 5. What I do enjoy about this game is, again, it's kind of the innovations. Double Mario power-ups, cat suits. Some people have criticized that it just felt like another Mario game, but it kind of did something different. I'll give it that. It wasn't like the new Super Mario Bros. Series. I'm going to be honest, I kind of hate that series. I don't think it's really well innovative. I just think it's retreading old stuff over and over again. This is stuff that I would actually appreciate and would love to buy. Super Mario 3D World was a success and is in some ways one of the top 5 best-selling Wii U games as of this date. Now, for one of the best-selling Wii U games, we jump 2 years later to one of the best games that has come out in the last couple months, Super Mario Maker. This game has people shitting their pants with excitement. They can build whatever they want in Mario. And while there has been criticism over, well, it doesn't have this, but it doesn't have that, it still has everything you would want for a Mario game. And the updates that keep coming, they keep coming strong. I don't have the game, I'm going to be honest, but this is the game I really want to get for the Wii U. I keep advocating to you guys to please be generous enough to find an additional copy, to buy an additional copy if you have to. just to send it out to me, because I would love to play this. I want to be a part of this. This is what I want. This is probably one of the reasons I bought the Wii U to begin with. Between this, Smash, and Mario Kart 8. This is the reason that anyone might have a chance to actually, like, want to live through, like, any of this. My point is, this game is just so great, because it kind of gets it. It gets that people just want to create stuff, and it does it well. I've seen so many of people's levels that it boggles my mind just how creative they've gotten. Mario Maker, hands down, is probably one of my favorite games for the Wii U. And I don't even have the game yet. But through friends, they've told me that this game is really good. So, I don't know what to say to that, but yeah, this game is really great. And there has been speculation, I guess, over whether or not they're going to then make a Zelda Maker. Which, if they do that, that'll be kind of fine. I mean, I would enjoy it, and I would probably buy it, but I think it just wouldn't work for some reason. There's a couple reasons it may not work, but I'm not going to get into that right now. I'll probably get into that in a later video. My point is, Mario Maker is one of those games I definitely want to get, and I keep advocating you people to try to go out and look for additional copies, because I would love to get my hands on it to play it. I've been working my ass off to try to get this game, and believe it or not, I'm always that close to getting it. So freaking close. This is why fan funding was put up, folks, for this game in particular. This is why it was out. For this, the Famicom, all the Famicom games that I would need. These are the reasons why I put up fan funding. Sorry for going on that little tyrant, but you get my point. This game is just so much fun. It makes me want to keep playing. It makes me want to keep playing my Wii U. I have not played my Wii U in like 2 months. That's because I've just been so busy making videos. But, with all of that said, I will see you guys next time as we finally get into the last part of Super Mario Month. Or Mario Month. Yada yada yada. I'm still getting over this. Kind of my anger and love and hate and betrayal. You get my point. Where we'll finally talk about the handheld Mario games. And we'll get into the variant Mario games. Not the ROM hacks. We're getting into basically the party games and the card games. I will see you guys next week. This is Tony saying, take care, and people, please, I would love to get Mario Maker. Hey guys, this is Tony and welcome back to Mario Month. We are in the final episode, which means we're going to be talking about all the miscellaneous games, along with the Game Boy games. So, as we all know, the Game Boy came out in 1989, and with that came one of the launch titles, Super Mario Land. This game is about Mario getting called upon to save another princess, not Peach by the way, this is Daisy, Luigi's girl, in Sarasaland from the evil alien Tatanga. And this game, for 1989 standards, is really good. Especially for a Game Boy game of Mario. And of course, as we all know, as the games would go on, they would get much better, but for this being one of the earliest, it's really good. It kind of reminds me of the 8-bit Mario games. Nothing I can really say about that. I just really enjoy this game. So yeah, this is a definite watch. So with the success of Mario Land, there came Mario Land 2, the 6 golden coins. My opinion on that game is, well, as you see I don't have it, it's kind of a little overrated, but it's still fun to play. I don't have any problem with it. Plus it was the introduction of Wario. I mean, come on. But, following that, they decided to switch the format from Mario to Wario with Super Mario Land 3, Wario Land. This game is actually one of the earliest memories I had of playing Game Boy games, and it was one of my favorites along with Kirby Dream Land. This game is still very fun to play today, and you know, despite how hard it is and despite the ending, which can go from being a complete disappointment to a complete joy, it's still really fun to pick up, and I do recommend, again, you pick up this trilogy. Now, there was one more, but it was only released in Japan, Super Mario Land 4. And I've played it. It sucks. Yeah, surprisingly, that's the one that sucks. And it sucks because it's vastly different from the first three games. It's just, they, they did so many things different in that game, but besides the point. Wario eventually got his own game series on the Game Boy following Mario Land, and that spawned off like 3 more games. Those were all successes. Something I forgot to mention in the Mario Part 1 and Part 2 of this month was Paper Mario. And me having played Paper Mario, and heck, I just got through playing Super Paper Mario, these are very fun games to play. And what makes them fun is the fact that they basically try to go off the beaten path of what regular Mario games do. And that's the fun of the game, is going off the beaten path and finding stuff that you weren't expecting to find. So these games are really good, and I cannot wait actually for the new one to come out, Mario and Luigi Paper Jam, which is going to be a crossover between this and the Mario and Luigi series. Which, that's another series we should talk about, the Mario and Luigi series. Those games are fun as well, and I think they are really underrated. I think that and Paper Mario are both underrated games, and I think it's time they got a little attention. I hope this crossover is what gives them the attention they need, because the main series games are the main series games. We've known that for decades now. But these smaller games, those are the ones that we should really pay attention to, because those could throw the biggest curveballs. So, yeah. Mario and Luigi and Paper Mario, 2 really underrated games. I really love them. The next games we have to talk about are the Mario Party games. Now, this could really span off into hundreds and hundreds of conversations about which ones were good, which ones were bad. For me, the way I put it is, the first 3 are the original 3. I'll put it like that. The first 3 are the original 3. And then there was, okay, I'll say the first 5. And then there was 6 and 7. 7 I remember playing a lot as a kid. I really enjoyed it. 6, And then there was 8. 8 was in some ways disappointing. And I'm actually going to be honest, it was disappointing. It was completely disappointing. Everyone can agree with me, that was disappointing. Then there is 9. 9 is, 9. I can't really say anything else about it. It's just 9. We can't really argue whether or not it's good or not. And Mario Party 10? Well, hopefully that's the rejuvenation this franchise needs, and when Mario Party 11 comes out, hopefully we'll get back to the classics territory. Because I'm not saying all of them are bad. I'm saying you could tell by 8 that they were starting to run out of ideas, or that they were starting to rehash the ideas. And that's not bad sometimes, but, as long as you add something new to the table, in some cases they did, in other cases they didn't. So, but at the same time, you don't want to really lose Mario Party, because that's like a fun party event for when your friends come over, and you're all partying out, and someone notices you have a Wii, and you start playing Mario Party. So, the Mario Party games are great. 8 is the only one I question. Get ready for this, ladies and gentlemen. I love Captain Toad. I actually think this is a really smart game. This is a really great puzzle game. Really challenging. Really thought-provoking, I guess, to say the least. What I enjoy about this is, I'm going to be honest and say Toad is one of my favorite Mario characters. And he's my favorite because he's just so goddamn adorable. How could you, not like a face like that? How could you look at a face like this and say, oh yeah, I hate that character so very much? And there are some people that have that feeling. More importantly, Nathan Wisniewski from New Gaming, who especially hates this game. But for me, this game is just fun. If I did a top 5 list, which hint, hint, I might do eventually for the Wii U, this would probably end up in the top 5 at least. So, yeah, Captain Toad, this one I really do hope it gets a sequel, because I do think it was a very, very intrugative, that's not a word, but you get my point. It's a very fun, very smart puzzle game, really challenging. Mario Kart. Mario Kart, what can you say about it? It's probably one of the best franchises Nintendo has made in the last couple of years. And yeah, I have 8 in my hand right now, but Mario Kart in general is just fun, especially when you're playing with 4 players, because it could just break friendships, and it could just question everyone else's values. What I love about Mario Kart is just how colorful and how fun it can be. Especially with power-ups, especially with characters, especially with the tracks. It just knows what to put in, and it knows what to keep out. I hope there is possibility for Mario Kart 9, because if they made 8 the last game, just keep doing DLC, I would love that, but I would love to also see a Mario Kart 9 for the NX. Other than that, Mario Kart, I would put in the top 5 of my favorite Wii U games. Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the final Mario-type spin-off game. You know what I'm talking about, the miscellaneous Mario games. This game has a slew of Mario characters. This game also has characters from Zelda, Metroid, Donkey Kong, Xenoblade, Fire Emblem, Mega Man, Pac-Man, Street Fighter. You all know it. Say it with me. Smash. Smash Bros. Is definitely one of those games that everyone has to have. This is the most fun you could ever have with a Wii U. Hell, even with a Wii. With a GameCube, with any of the consoles from like the N64 onward, this had to be a must-have. What makes this game fun is the cooperative play, is the fighting, is the level design, is the characters, is the trophies, is everything. This is probably one of the best Wii U games out there, for the time being. And as we all know, there's Mario Maker. But still, this has got to be one of the best. And with the new DLC that just came out, which will include Cloud, yeah, I will be getting some gift cards to get the characters, and the new stages, and the new costumes, and everything. Sheesh. What else can I say? This game is great. The entire game series of this is great. This is just, overall, probably one of my favorite games for the Wii U. This one right here. Probably one of my favorite game series of all time. It's just up there. And folks, this ends Mario Month. I know there's still one more week left of November. But Thanksgiving is approaching, and then we gotta start on December. So, yeah, we ended a little early. Hey, would you have liked it better if we did this every freaking day? Hell no. I know I wouldn't have. With that said, I will see you next time when we will be discussing a certain YouTube personality and his supposed real web series. This is Tony Rasmussen, signing out. I will see you next time. Hey folks, this is Tony, and it is time to answer a question that has been boiling out my mind for the last couple of months. Believe me, this question has been really odd and really difficult to ask myself and to try to find reason with. Does reality have a status quo? Because it sort of seems like it does. And I know general logic is, oh no, man chooses destiny in his own future, and all of that philosophical stuff. But my logical question is there kind of a base level for a person's, how do I put this, psyche?
where he feels it is the most normal, it is the most safe. Like that baseline to say, okay, if everything screws up, we get back to this point in my life. Does that exist for most people? Probably. Does it always happen? Yes. I think there is those moments when things just snap back to status quo. Now, for some, it could just easily be, a couple of days, and for others, it could take a couple months. And again, I might sound a little crazy for saying that, but my whole reasoning behind this theory is because I've seen stuff where I can't believe it happened, people can't believe it happened, they get upset over the event, and within a couple weeks, snap, things are back to normal. What the hell happened? To talk about status quo, though, it's a TV trope that exists for shows that know they have a formula, for shows that know that, what the base level of reality is for them. And when they go over the top and crazy, they have to find that way to snap it back to reality, and every show has that. The Simpsons have it, Family Guy has it, South Park has it, or had it, King of the Hill has it, every show has it. Every show has that base level of reality. My question is, though, does reality have a base level of itself? And for some people, yes. For others, maybe not. Again, it probably depends on preference. So, you're probably wondering, why am I bringing this up? Why am I discussing a topic like this at a moment like this? Well, a couple months ago, I had a friend who went through really rough times and was planning to, off himself. So, when I was at the store that evening, he was planning to do this, that's when I found out, first off, and I had heard that a friend of his girlfriend's was going to go search this one place, but they didn't know how to get there, and they needed directions, and I told them I knew how to get there, so I gave him help. So I went with them, and I got told the entire story. I kind of was in awe when I heard what had happened. But he didn't do it. Let me just clarify that. He didn't do it. They found him the next day. I guess his reasoning was he just didn't feel right, and he wanted to be left alone, left normal. And suicide's a really touchy subject, so I'm not going to really get that deep into it. But all I know is the events that took place prior, from what I heard, were really, really, trying to think of the word. I mean, yeah, you want to kind of tie up loose ends before you plan to do this, but it seemed really selfish. He left work early, he broke up with his girlfriend, and he left his friends. That's what happened. So, and I mainly want to focus on that second part, breaking up with his girlfriend, because it seemed like then, for the next couple weeks following that he had kind of, left her and really did mean it. That was until, in my point in time now, which is the present, a couple months ago, when while I was dawdling around on Facebook, I found a couple of his posts that he had posted up, usually some philosophical quotes and stuff like that, because he's that type of person. I found a picture that he had updated his cover photo with him and his girlfriend, and in my mind I just thought to myself, did she really forgive him, or did he just find some way to get things back to normal, back to status quo? At that point, that's when I knew I had to make this. When I saw that photo, I just said to myself, that is just so fucking weird. How she would just take him back after kind of finding out that she was the reason he did this. So I'm not going to get into that subject at all. I just wanted to say that was the base example for why I'm making this. That could be an actual theory. there could be any possibility of just once reality has its base set for you, there's no way you can kind of change it. That's your base set. You can go as far out as you want and try to do whatever you want, but if all else fails, things go back to normal. Everyone, and yeah, I know, everyone can change their own perception of reality and stuff like that. They can make, life-changing, decisions and choose who they're going to be with and what job they're going to have and where they live and all that, but I'm saying there is kind of that moment when you start to really consider what you consider your baseline normal. And when things start to go out of the normal, that's when you realize there could be the possibility of things snapping back to normal, if only certain things would happen. I personally myself am in that boat of trying to get things back to normal. And for me, the only way I could do that was to kind of try to wipe out the last 5 years of my life. And I've been trying to do that, but I also don't want to lose any great things that happened in between. All the trips I took, all the experiences I had. So for me, it's just trying to wipe romantically the slate clean and trying to start fresh anew with an old flame of mine. But that's kind of, for me, though, my level of status quo. Now, will that actually happen? Will things kind of simmer out for me? Who knows? Only time will tell. But if it doesn't, there's still the chance to go out there and try something new. And yeah, I do highly advocate people to go out there and try something new if you get the chance. Because trying something new could result in the best known feeling, or give you a sudden epiphany for realizing what you were thinking. So, with all that said, I might have sounded crazy for bringing all this up, but does reality once again have a status quo? Maybe. It depends on your preference of people. For me, I could say yes. I only say it because I've gotten so used to things happening in this small town that it's just crazy. So, with that said, folks, I will see you next time. We're going to be talking about a certain YouTuber and whether or not his stuff is real. Take care. Hello, this is Tony Rasmussen, and welcome to the 300th video. So, this is also the ending of mini reviews for the year. We're going to be taking our couple weeks off, and then we'll come back with new episodes in January. With all that said, though, today we're going to be talking about a certain YouTube personality who has been making videos for the past 3-4 years. And if you've read the title, then you know what I'm talking about. We're talking about McJuggerNuggets, so we're mainly going to be talking about the Psycho videos. What can I say about this? Well, to be honest, let's get the premise out of the way. The Psycho videos is the video series, and yeah, I'm putting it as a video series or a web series, about a 23-year-old guy who wants to be a gamer, wants to be a YouTuber, wants to be big, but is constantly getting kind of dashed by his father and his brother, and it's constantly butting heads and stuff like that. The show currently is in its 4th season, and from what you've seen recently, things have not been so great. And it hasn't been great because, well, the main glue to the show, which would have been the mother character, is completely gone, so everything with Jesse, Jeffrey, and Jeff is completely insane out there. No one knows what to do. So, to kind of backtrack, though, I want to go back to the beginning. When the series began, it was kind of like a day-by-day vignette of something new happening almost every week. And when it all kind of happened, it just happened. There was no real big continuity. And for what there was, it was just kind of reflecting on what had happened the past couple weeks. And that mainly happened, I think, in one episode in Season 1. season 1 ends with the Christmas episode, yada yada yada. The element from the Christmas episode gets kind of played back in again in season 2. And season 2, they start doing the story arcs, the main huge story arcs, with the 2 main arcs for that season being the trophy arc and the kicked out arc. And the kicked out arc kind of leads into season 3. And season 3 ends up having like 4 major arcs, which is the return, which you kind of have Jesse coming back. You have the prank war arc, you have the North Carolina arc, you have the kicked out arc again. Yeah, that's right, he gets kicked out again. And that kind of leads us into season 4 with the kicked out arc, which is weirdly really short the second time around. Like the first time it was about a good month, 2 months. And the second time it was only a couple weeks. With the second kicked out arc, though, things just kind of go back to normal, and then we begin the construction of the room arc. And then after that arc, we get into technically the divorce arc, which is where we're currently at, but that takes like a while. It probably takes a couple months. Yeah, about a month, 2 months. What basically kind of results out of this, though, is currently Jesse's mom is out of the house, she's in the RV. Jeffrey and Jeff are kind of going out of their minds. Well, Jeffrey not really, because he's kind of suffering from a blow to the head he got with Jesse back a couple episodes prior. And yeah, that's kind of the mess. So my question is, I wonder how they're going to kind of solve this by January, because from what we heard, January will be the series finale. So they basically got a couple episodes left to kind of fix everything. And if they can't fix everything, then wow, the show ended on a pretty somber ass note. What I should really mention, though, is all the characters. Like, we know the main characters, Jesse, Jeffrey, and Jeff. But, the side characters, too. There's Juliet, his girlfriend, Jesse's girlfriend, Corn, his best friend, Uncle Larry, Tom, Uncle Larry's son. Just all these characters we get introduced to, as the seasons progress. And, some of them, ended up getting their own success stories. Juliet ends up being a spinoff, Corn gets a spinoff, and Larry gets a spinoff. And what I can really say to that is, it was just kind of more fluctuating to, say, like, okay, this could be one giant entity, one giant, franchise. And the other one who got, like, a spinoff was Jeffrey, and I actually do enjoy Jeffrey's spinoff a lot more than anyone else's spinoff. Hell, I would even say even more than the original show. But that's only because Jeffrey, in some ways, is, like, one of my favorite characters, because he's diabolical, because he's kind of mean-spirited. Because, in all honesty, he's just kind of trying to prove a point, but he does it in the most insane ways. So, to kind of wrap this up, what I can mainly say about the show is it real, is it fake? It's kind of in between. I mean, yeah, it's kind of fake-ish when you can tell it's fake, but that's because it tries to act like a TV show, but it's trying to also act like a reality show. It just kind of works on both ends. And if Jesse ever ends up finding this video, then let it be said that, Jesse, I do subscribe, I'm kind of a juggy, I just have to question certain things. So with all that said, folks, yeah, I really can't say much else. To me, the show is, I watch it, but I watch it because I just say to myself, oh, thank God I'm not that person. Thank God I don't have that life. But also I kind of watch it to say, well, I could be far off worse. And basically that's it, folks. This is the end of our first year of mini reviews, and like I said, we'll be back in January where we're going to cover 2 weeks worth of one topic, and it's actually a list. So you gotta keep your ears wide open and your eyes peeled and everything. You know what I'm talking about. Keep your eyes open, keep your ears out. Listen in for what's coming up. This is Tony Rasmussen, signing out.